Here we are now in the second part of the authentic speech approach. We've learned how to start your presentation with a shocking beginning strategy. You're going to choose one of those ways that you've been putting in your workbook, whether that be a statistic, a survey, a story, a song, or even a saying. And now we're going to move to the P, and the P is all about positioning. So what do I mean about positioning? What I mean here is your clients right now, when you've done a presentation, will have answered the questions, why should I listen to this, as in your subject? Why should they listen? What's in it for them? Why should they listen to it now? And the final question is, why should they listen to you? Because of course they're looking for somebody that they can follow, that's been in their steps, or at least knows them how to get from that pain to that gain that we talked about at the beginning. When we are doing a story, it may sound odd, but it's not a story for you. It is still for your audience. So what do I mean by that? I mean your audience need to be able to recognise themselves in your journey. There are two types of story that you can do. There is your journey, your hero's journey, if you like, from woe to win. Or there is your story where you've worked with a client and you help them to get from woe to win. Now, which one's going to be right for you, you might be thinking? Well, there is a very simple question that you can ask. Does your client want to be you? In other words, do they want to be, in my case, a public speaker? The answer is yes. So it is really good for them to see the journey that I took, as long as it resonates with the pains that they're going through. Does that make sense? And as long as it resonates with where they want to be, which is where I am now. If the answer to the question is no, they don't want to be me, but they do want to learn from me, then that would be a preference towards a client story, because they want to see how you've helped other people to get from A to B. In my case, I can probably do both. I could do my story, people hear all the pains that I had before I became a speaker, why I became a speaker and where I am now. Or of course, I can share with them many of the hundreds, if not thousands of testimonials and the journeys that I've been with my clients. So let's just go for the easier version to begin with, and that is your story of woe to win. How do we begin? We're talking about positioning, and in the case of positioning, I have developed the life-changing movie maker. With the life-changing movie maker, there are just 3 steps. Well, there are 3 parts really to creating a life-changing movie. Because would you agree, people like to see characters coming through the stories and winning. So there are 3 members of the audience. There are 3 members of the story, not the audience. The first one is the hero. The next one is the adversary, the person not so much to like, but actually the adversary can be the catalyst for change. And there is the mentor. And there are 3 acts: Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. So at this stage, we're just going to storyboard. So bearing in mind, these are the 3 characters that you need in your story. You are going to be the hero because we're going to go from woe to win, okay? However, remember what I said at the beginning. Your client is still the most important person in this story. This story is for your client, not for you, to go, oh, look what happened to me. Because in Act 1, the hero is going to come across an adversary, okay? And the adversary is going to be the person who is not being very nice to your hero, in other words, you in your story, and they're going to make life difficult. This problem, or if you like, the past, has to equal a problem, and the problem needs to be one that your audience recognise. So what do I mean by that? For example, in my story, I talk about going to an event and Andy Harrington was on stage and he looked at me and he said, if you were to die tomorrow, who would mourn your loss? And I remember looking at my friend next to me and saying, well, I've got 43 friends on Facebook. What can I say? I don't get out much. And she said to me, if that number is small, according to Andy Harrington, you led a life of small influence. And I heard loser. And the reality was I didn't get out much because, of course, I was there with my 2 best friends, Gordon and Stella. I was drinking and I really was distracting from life. And I will then say to the audience, have you ever distracted from life? Have you ever been distracted by sex, drugs, sausage rolls, Netflix, whatever it is? And that is what resonates with my audience, because mainly women of a certain age, shall we say 45 plus, you're starting to realise the clock is ticking, and if you were to die tomorrow, what would be the situation? How many people would turn up to your funeral? How many people have you influenced in your life? And if that isn't many, you start to think you're leading a life of regret. Thumbs up if that resonates with you. Yeah. So I know this because I know that's how I felt when I was 48. 12 years on, I know that there are many other women out there that feel the same as I did when I was 48. The clock is ticking. So we need to be doing stuff now. Makes sense? So in this first scene, yes, it's my story. Yes, it's when I met Andy Harrington. Yes, it's when I started to get involved in public speaking. But it's more about what are the problems that you're going to raise in your life that your audience are going to be able to connect with. So here, there is the past, the problem that was going on, what was happening, who was the hero and who was the adversary. Now, in my story, if you know it, my story is Dracula was the adversary because he was saying that I needed to work, like 24/7 every single day. And I wanted to, just get home and get away from that kind of life. Now, Dracula really, when I look back, was a real catalyst for change. He'd helped me to get into personal development. So he wasn't a bad character. It's just he knew his why and I didn't know mine at the time. But because of his actions, it led me to go on a search. So adversary doesn't necessarily need to be like a really bad person, although it may be somebody who physically, mentally, tortured you, in which case they definitely are an adversary. So in Act 1, if you just go to your workbook now, I want you to write down these questions. Where were you? Who were you with? What was happening? And how does this relate to your audience? So why does this relate to your audience? So go ahead right now, stop the video, go back to a time and place where you know that you were having a problem that would be something that your ideal client would go, I recognise that because that could be me. So go ahead, do that right now, and I'll see you on the next video to talk about Act 2.